So, I'm pondering what a self-portrait really is and how I can present a self-portrait that is as unmediated as possible. So, if a portrait is a combination of things, stories, ideas, what I look like, how I smell, how I sound, they would all be considered me. They're all me. They're all authentic. So my way of thinking is that I'm going to look at the five senses. I think identity is a really, really interesting way of looking at self-portraiture and art. And with the majority of the research that I've conducted for my project on self-portraiture and authenticity, I keep finding artists who use their art to talk about or have commentary on part of their identity that to me is very, mainstream, such as I'm a female artist and I struggle in Western society, or I have an ancestry and background that are a minority, or I come from somewhere that's been very violent, or I come from an alcoholic family, or something along those lines. But when I look at myself or my own identity, and if I was to put it into the same sort of context, it's very mainstream. I'm white, I'm female, I'm Caucasian, Western, brought up pretty normal. Don't subscribe to a specific demographic, or do I? But why does that matter? Why does those types of commentaries on identity have to be a part of a self-portrait? If a self-portrait is an amalgam or a cornucopia of different things, like five senses, like who I am, what I wear, what I do, how I say things, language that I use, and all of these things, then it really isn't a self-portrait, a catalogue. It's a catalogue of identity. It's a catalogue of ideas. It's a catalogue of concepts that all make up that one individual. But that's not how I see self. For example, yes, I'm female. However, when I think about self or think about who I am on the inside, female doesn't really come into it, really doesn't have a big bearing to me on who I am. And I think that's a really interesting concept. I just found a really interesting article called Notes on Transformation by artist Eleanor Anton in 1974 from Theories and Documents of Contemporary Art, a source book of artists' writings by Christine Stiles. Eleanor Anton says, every human being must choose from the styles he finds available a persona that he will find appropriate to a dimly realised sense he has of his self as a field of possibilities. Autobiography can be considered a particular type of transformation in which the subject chooses a specific, as yet unarticulated image and proceeds to progressively define his self with increasing refinement, which in turn both clarifies and makes precise the original image while at the same time transforming the subject. One might say a successful transformation has been effected when image and subject approach a perfect fit. In a strictly phenomenological sense, total equivalence may be impossible, but since distance blurs distinctions, Provided they are subtle enough, the fellow next to us probably has no suspicion that he's talking to an imposter. Admittedly, problems arise. Perhaps the fit isn't good enough. Perhaps the plastic material cannot accommodate itself precisely enough to the original image. Or conversely, the original image may not be complex enough for the diverse possibilities of any given plastic material. But people are stubborn, and a whole literature of neurosis has been generated by the pathos of the commitment to the bad fit. Yet other problems can arise. One's neighbours may have insufficient generosity to permit others self-images they find unaesthetic or frightening or embarrassing to their own. A tradition of mental hospitals and penal institutions has been erected to protect certain images from being confronted by other images. Science, government, education, art, the cultural monolith may be said to exist primarily to exercise a paternal influence, decorously if possible, aggressively if necessary, to enforce certain accepted images upon individuals. I think that kind of says a fair bit about who we are, where we fit, authenticity, and the self. So I'm watching BBC's What Artists Do All Day episode on Cornelia Parker. And Cornelia mentions an exhibition she did with that ended up having all these things in glass cases. And one was Tilda Swinton, who's a well-known actress. And she slept in this case for 8 hours a day. And Cornelia Parker said it was interesting because she was there and she was breathing and alive, even though she was in this case, and yet she was asleep. So she was absent at the same time. And I thought that was really interesting when I'm looking at my self-portrait work and project, because the ideas behind my project currently are about being present and absent at the same time, and I hadn't considered being asleep, so I thought that was really, really interesting. I've been watching also BBC What Artists Do All Day episode on Anthony Gormley, who is one of my favourite artists. He's a sculpturist also who does a lot of life-size models of a male being or male human body in certain materials and in certain different areas, very much public art. And he always uses his own body as the mould or as the model. And he says that he doesn't consider them self-portraits, which I think is very interesting. So what does that say about what a self-portrait is? Anthony Gormley says he uses his body because his body is material. And when you think about it, and artists needing or requiring material, and if it's human, they've always got one available. They always have their own. So hence self-portraiture is kind of a natural progression or a natural subject to use. However, he says he doesn't consider any of his work a self-portrait, which is interesting. I wish he would have elaborated on that. I can understand using it as material, but is it still not a self-portrait? Interesting.